All right, well, welcome to our final panel of the morning. I apologize for the weather. I put in a call with the man upstairs, so hopefully we will see some sunshine. As Johnny was saying yesterday, ISI very much serves as the alma mater for conservative students and faculty. And as such, we want to welcome you back home to our campus. For years, alumni have been asking what programs are available after graduation. As students, you engage with great ideas and talk about the permanent things and really want to continue the conversation. Well, we've heard you, and we are officially launching alumni programming, as you can see by this weekend. We will continue to host weekend-long seminars for alumni and young professionals to delve back into the world of ISI ideas. This past semester, just like everybody here this weekend, we've brought together alumni across a 60-year span. One of these examples was this past February in Annapolis. We were discussing the founders after the founding, led by another alum, Dr. Gary Gregg. And I think ISI is probably one of the only organizations where we have the capability and the desire to bring back alumni spanning those 60 years to discuss these ideas. We also have some regional groups forming right now just on the East Coast. If you are interested in forming an alumni group, please come talk to me afterwards. One of our panelists, Will Long, has helped start a debate society in DC, the Cicero Society, which you'll be hearing about later today. We will also be hosting regional receptions and providing opportunities for many alumni, like many of you in here, to give back. If you want to hear about all these exciting updates, I have a plug. Please enter your updated information at join.isi.org or download the app so that you can be the first to hear about all these exciting updates. Now, if you are or you know someone who is like me, who didn't hear about ISI as an undergrad, but would like to get involved in the programming, we have great news for you. In spring 2022, we're going to be launching the George Washington Fellowship Program, which will be an 8-week course for alumni and young professionals to engage with the ideals and institutions that sustain America's constitutional order and free enterprise system by exploring key texts in philosophy, politics, and economics with top ISI faculty and public intellectuals. One of these key texts will definitely include Edmund Burke, whom we are very much fans of here at ISI. And Burke and his idea of the social contract between generations is something that we really hold on to. So today, we'd like to take you through the generations here at ISI, and we've assembled quite the impressive lineup for y'all. First, to my left, we have Dr. Lee Edwards, who literally wrote the book on ISI. It will be available for sale, should you be interested. Although we're talking, we might need another update, because this is only the first 50 years, and we're coming up on our 75th anniversary, so we might have an update for y'all. He is the leading historian of American conservatism and serves as the Distinguished Fellow of Conservative Thought at the Heritage Foundation, and he is also a former ISI graduate fellow. And then we have Dr. Ed Feulner, speaking of former ISI graduate fellows, who is the man, the myth, the legend. Ed is the co-founder and former president of the Heritage Foundation. He is a longtime trustee of ISI and recipient of the Charles Hoflick Lifetime Achievement Award. And then we have Eric Wind, who is the owner of Wind Vintage, where he advises top vintage watch collectors around the world and offers exceptional watches for purchase. You'll hear a little bit more about that actually later. And Eric received his MBA from the University of Oxford and was an ISI Honors Scholar as an undergraduate at Georgetown. And then finally, we have Will Long, who is the founder and CEO of Numinar Analytics, which has created the first AI platform for political campaigns. He is a summa cum laude graduate of Harvard, where he was an ISI Honors Scholar and Society Leader. He is also one of the recipients of ISI's Top 20 Under 30 Award. So with that, I'll pass it to Dr. Edwards.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful day in Wilmington, but still a great day to be alive, particularly for an event here at ISI headquarters. I've long said that there are three indispensable institutions in the conservative movement: National Review, the Heritage Foundation — I had to say that since I belong there —
We write those checks.
and ISI. But how did it begin? So what I'd like to share with you, just a few brief words on where ISI came from. So let's go back midway to the year 1950. And Frank Chodorow, a radical libertarian, and frequent campus lecturer, determined to challenge one of the most powerful institutions in the country, the American Academy, no small task, which he believed was largely responsible for the trend to socialism in America. And in his self-published newsletter, Analysis, Chodorov proposed the creation of a network of campus clubs for individualists, which would, among other things, launch a lecture bureau and start a publication directed at the student mind. His model was the Intercollegiate Socialist Society. The Intercollegiate Socialist Society, formed in the early 1900s, and including among its members Norman Thomas, John Reed, and Clarence Darrow. ISS helped build the intellectual foundation for progressivism and the New Deal. Chodorov argued that the only way to stop the descent into ever more statism was to inculcate the values that made socialist laws impossible. And he conceded that such a chore might take 50 years. Well, given the tiny circulation of Frank's newsletter, it's not surprising the reaction to his proposal was underwhelming. But in September of 1950, his essay was reprinted in Human Events, the leading conservative publication of the time. As a matter of fact, the only conservative publication of the time. Letters poured in praising the idea of such an organization. Copies of the essay were printed, distributed in the thousands, as a matter of fact, but still no concrete organizational move was attempted. Then, in March 1952, Chodorov revisited the subject in Human Events, titling his essay now, The Adam Smith Clubs. And for those of you in the front row, you can see there is an Adam Smith tie. The Adam Smith Clubs. Frank argued that such clubs were urgently needed to, quote, find and help the submerged individualism on campus and provide an opposition to the collectivism being ladled out by the professors. Well, the reaction was not as dramatic as that generated by his earlier essay, with one important, all-important difference. Arriving at Human Events offices was a $1,000 check from one of the most generous benefactors of the American conservative movement, Sun Oil founder J. Howard Pugh, a passionate opponent of collectivism. But Frank Chodorov didn't know what to do with the check. He was a writer, not an activist. So what did he do? He put it in a drawer. But he couldn't stop thinking about it. Finally, he asked his friend and colleague, Frank Hannigan, the editor of Human Events, what he should do. I have one rule, Hannigan said, never send money back. Thank heavens for Frank. And with Hannigan's encouragement, and after visiting Mr. Pugh in his Philadelphia office, is this check really going to clear? Chodorov turned and formalized the idea on April 3rd, 1952. The Intercollegiate Society of Individualists was incorporated in the District of Columbia. The president, 26-year-old William F. Buckley, Jr. Chodorov had met Buckley while he was at Yale and had encouraged, as a matter of fact, the publisher Henry Regnery to publish Buckley's first manuscript, God and Man, at Yale. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is the genesis, and there is of ISI. Its godfathers comprised a radical libertarian, a billionaire capitalist, a Harvard alumnus, Frank Hannigan, and a Roman Catholic fusionist. Who says there's no such thing as providence? Thank you.
Thanks, Lee, for those early reflections on the founding of ISI. And I've got 10 minutes to cover my first 10 years, which started, I went away to, left suburban Chicago to go to college. My father said, "You're going to go to the Jesuits," because he was on the board at Loyola in Chicago. And I said, well, Spring Hill, Alabama, Kansas City, Denver. Oh, that sounds pretty good. So I went to Regis in Denver, ran into a history professor by the name of Bernard Sheehan, who just passed away about 5 years ago, who after about 10 years at Regis went to Indiana University, where actually he was a professor of our late colleague John von Cannon. And one day in one of his introductory history classes and political science kind of theory, kind of all merged together, he started a discussion on liberty or equality. And most of us, being 19-year-old know-it-alls, said, we're in favor of both. It's not either or, it's both. At which point he assigned us to read Erich von Kuhnelt-Ledeen's book by that title, Liberty or Equality. Those of you of perhaps even a slightly younger vintage than Lee or me will remember Erich von Kuhnelt-Ledeen, who was a regular lecturer for ISI, coming over from Austria every fall and spending 10, 12 weeks going around the country to ISI chapters. From that, I went on, started reading Human Events. Conservative Mind was an early volume. And gradually, I became aware of this group called the Intercollegiate Studies Institute in Intercollegiate Society of Individualists then, at 629 Public Ledger Building, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. By 61, I was attending an ISI Christmas seminar in Indianapolis, where I met a guy just a few years older than me by the name of Richard Allen, who was one of the lecturers talking about foreign policy and the serious challenge we faced from the Soviet Union. Kept working with ISI in various ways, got myself elected student body president, which was very handy because I decided I was going to start an ISI chapter. I got permission from Philadelphia to do so, and much to the chagrin of several of the Jesuits in the hierarchy at Regis, I decided I was going to call it the American Society. I wasn't going to give any credence to necessarily limiting myself to being a conservative or a libertarian conservative or anything else. The American Society was an ISI affiliate from 1962 until about 5 years after I left, when it went the way many college organizations go. We had Thomas Molnar, and we did have Erich Kuhnelt-Ledeen out as lecturers for ISI. By 62, it was the Detroit Christmas seminar for ISI, where I met not only Richard Allen again, I met a bright young professor at Bradley University by the name of Philip Crane. Hillsdale College, 61, Johnny, you know that. And Phil Crane had his PhD from Indiana University, had moved to Illinois, and eventually would have a much bigger impact on my life. From there, I got my degree, 63, went to the Wharton School for an MBA, which was very convenient because it was 2 stops on the local bus away from 629 Public Ledger Building, where the then president of ISI, longtime president after Bill Buckley, Vic Milioni, not only would have me down to lunch about once a month, he also introduced me to something that I don't know how many people in the current generation even know what it is, but Campari. The first time I had a Campari, I thought it was cough medicine, but I did develop a taste for it, I must say, over the next few years. But Milioni was an amazing guy, and he was about as pessimistic as anybody could be. And in those days, Lyndon Johnson, Great Society, and all the rest of it, it was easy to be conservative and to be a pessimist. He had a guy working for him, though, by the name of Don Lipset. Don Lipset was the national field director. And Don Lipset and I became very close friends. And my 3 semesters at Wharton were interrupted when in October 64, Don Lipset called me and said, I got tickets for us to go up to New York City tomorrow. We're going to meet Bill Buckley. I said, okay, I'll cancel my classes. The hell with it. So we took the, 10 o'clock or whatever it was, Pennsylvania Railroad. This was before Amtrak. To New York, went to the Sheraton Atlantic Hotel across the street from Penn Station, met Bill Buckley and Frank Meyer. The 4 of us had a nice chat, and then the surprise guest appeared. Don Lipset had arranged for Milton Friedman, who was the visiting scholar at Columbia that year, to come and meet Bill Buckley for the very first time, which happened then. And the 5 of us sat around the table and had a serious discussion. A couple of us knew about this thing called the Mont Pelerin Society, international philosophers, economists that Hayek had started in the 1940s, and wouldn't it be nice if we had something like that in the United States? Anyway, we decided we would. We'd call it the Philadelphia Society, and Lipset was the first secretary, and his successor, Bill Campbell, is here with us now. And Buckley decided, actually, he said, well, Feulner, you're getting an MBA, so you must know how to do accounting. Become the treasurer. I said, I don't have $100 to open a bank account, at which point Bill Buckley wrote a check for $100 to this new group to be called the Philadelphia Society. I went down, opened a bank account. We set up the organization, and that's today's Philadelphia Society. A couple of spin-offs from that directly. I guess I had kind of an inside track. I shouldn't admit this because it's become much more competitive. But 64 to 65 was the first year of Weaver Fellowships. And I finagled somehow that since I was graduating in December, I should get a Weaver Fellowship for the second semester, in effect, of that academic year. I got it and went to the London School of Economics. I wrote a letter to Milton Friedman and told him I was going there. Did he know anybody in England that I should look up? Because I knew that Hayek was in fact going to be a visiting professor there for at least a month, and I would certainly want to meet him. And Friedman sent me a letter of introduction to a guy by the name of Ralph Harris, who ran the Institute for Economic Affairs in London. I called on Ralph Harris when I got to London. Ralph Harris offered me a part-time job 2 days a week at £5 a day in cash, which meant I was probably violating 2 or 3 different British laws for not being on the books. But anyway, it was my first exposure to a think tank, which of course became very significant later on. ISI continued to intervene in very positive ways. We started an ISI club at the London School of Economics. At Hayek's suggestion, we called it the Old Whig Society. And there were 5 of us. And London School of Economics, of course, was very much part of the Intercollegiate Socialist Society. Right. But by that time, LSE was very, very open-minded in terms of the faculty. All the students were hardcore lefties because they all had one kind of government grant or another. But they had Peter Bauer and Basil Yamey and a bunch of other really good, what we would now call either libertarian or conservative scholars. Kenneth Minogue was one of my political science professors, a protege of Michael Oakeshott, later succeeded me as president of the Mont Pelerin Society 30 years afterwards. So LSE was very much a formative kind of era for me. And I forgot this one. Before I left for LSE, ISI started the Intercollegiate Review. I thought, well, it'd be kind of nice if we had somebody who had some international experience. So I was appointed, editorial advisor or something. My name actually appears in Volume 1, Number 1 of the Intercollegiate Review. And the only thing I ever really did that was notable during the course of my 2 terms at London School of Economics, then going over to try to learn some German, I visited Otto von Habsburg and convinced him to write an article on the current situation between East and West Europe. And that article appeared in the Intercollegiate Review in 1967. I urge you to look at it. Last time I checked, it was on the ISI website. And in it, Habsburg talked both about his own pan-European movement, but he also laid out in philosophical terms why Eastern Europe could not continue under communist ideology, under Marxist ideology, and under communist control. A very, very prescient piece that I think ISI ought to take some real credit for. While I'm there, Dick Allen comes up, visits me, says, I'm going to be joining a group called the Center for Strategic International Studies in Washington. We've got a fellowship there. Why don't you come and do that with me? Make a long story short, I did. Showed up there in the fall of '64. Continued my involvement with ISI. The Philadelphia Society was up and running. Dick Allen showed me what a U.S. think tank would be like, with seminars and conferences and lectures and publications. And I got to know some really neat people, renewed acquaintances with my old Pennsylvania at the Wharton School. I had a good friend who was actually working on a PhD by the name of John Lehman. John and I took out an apartment together, and we were roommates for a long time. We had occasional tiffs because I was dating a young woman then, and every once in a while he'd try to move in on me. And now, 52 years later, I won. But anyway, Lehman and I remain good friends, and he since has been Secretary of the Navy and various other things like that. Along the line, Phil Crane was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. I left CSIS, became Phil Crane's Chief of Staff. Phil Crane and I talked about, geez, what the Democrats have done. They've got the Democrat study group. We ought to do something like that to reinforce the conservatives inside the Republican Party in the House. So Crane decides we ought to do this. Feulner should be the director of this Republican study committee. That became, in effect, the inside operation for conservatism in Washington. We talked some more. That was fine, except we didn't have enough staff to really do all the kinds of studies, and there was no other group in Washington really doing it. We needed what we called an outside group. Happened to talk in long story that Lee has written about very eloquently. We raised some money from a Colorado brewer, which is why you'll still get Coors beer whenever you come to a heritage event, by the name of Joe Coors, and he put up the seed capital for what eventually became the Heritage Foundation. After 3 years working at the study committee, Heritage had gone through some tribulations as a young organization. I went to Heritage in 1977. Was there for the next 30 years, and the rest, as they say, is history. But the reason I go into those details is because every step along the way in that first 10 years, during college, after college, during graduate school, and during my life trajectory as a young alum, ISI was really at the center of it. As I said a couple of years ago, ISI really did change my life trajectory, and I confirmed that in 1972 when I was home, and by this time, as I say, Crane's AA with the idea of Heritage on the kind of working around in the back of my mind. I told my father, no, Dad, I'm not coming home to run the family real estate business in Chicago. I've got a different thing in mind. So there we are, 10 years and 10 minutes.
Well, thank you so much for everyone coming here. It's incredibly exciting, and I'm honored to be on the panel next to these great gentlemen. My story with ISI began actually at a boys' state in Wisconsin, where I grew up. It's a program put on by the American Legion. I guess it's not really politically correct because you have boys' state and you have girls' state, and it's not mixed. But there's a great Apple TV documentary called Boys State that's worth watching recently. That's kind of a documentary of a boys' state in Texas a few years ago. And everyone at the Boys State got a copy of ISI Student Guide to American History. And that was my first introduction to ISI. I read through it. It's very brief, digestible. thing to read. It was before senior year in high school. And then I was interested. I signed up. In the book was a old school postcard. You put a stamp on it, send it in to join the mailing list. And then when I went to Georgetown, I made sure to sign up as well, kind of online. And then a guy named Francisco Gonzalez reached out to me, who was kind of campus leadership, campus membership rep, and he was coming to DC. I think we met at the Tombs in Georgetown, and I was not of legal age to drink, but we had a beverage, and that was the beginning. Francisco is such a warm and welcoming person. I was interested in starting a publication, which I started. We had a kind of conservative newspaper, but I was interested in longer form political thought and discussions rather than the predecessors of tweets. So I started a publication called Utraque Unum. That our first issue, we had a speech by Justice Scalia that he had given at Georgetown for the inauguration of the Tocqueville Forum, and that was very exciting. And we had a mix of Father Schall always contributed a piece, who was a professor of mine at Georgetown and taught me so much. And then I applied to the honors program after for my sophomore year. For that summer, that year we went to Quebec City, and I met a few of my best friends to this day in that program, and then participated in a number of colloquia after the last 2 years of my time at Georgetown. And those were just some of the best highlights of my time. It really was a discussion. I met so many great professors from around the country. It was not just being lectured at, but a true discussion, mentorship by the professors, and friends, developing friends, really some of my best friends came out of those things. So that I loved ISI, and when I graduated, I felt that was really one of the most important elements of my college education. As Johnny Burka said last night, not the supplement or finishing school, but the heart and the meat of the education that I had. So one of the things that was helpful for me with ISI was a gentleman named Mark Henry, who was with ISI, told us all during the honors program not to become lawyers unless we he said lawyers should be like plumbers, just someone to fix a problem, not the heart of the matter, and don't do law school unless you really, really love it and want to do that. And I think the default for a lot of intelligent young people is to become a lawyer. So I was definitely glad he discouraged me from that. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I got a job with a small consulting firm in DC and worked for a number of interesting people, and realized that my education was more on politics and international affairs in the Middle East, and I didn't know much about business. So I decided to pursue an MBA at Oxford. And then I got a job with a biofuel company in Florida, a startup that was turning tobacco into ethanol, biodiesel, and jet fuel, which was a fascinating experience as well. But I could see kind of the future of biofuel due to low oil prices and intentional keeping oil prices low by Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the Middle East, that it was going to kill that field, which it effectively has. Decided all during that time after college, I was interested in watches as a passion, collecting them, just something I always enjoyed. And I think I was featured in the Manitowoc, Wisconsin newspaper in 5th grade and said my favorite TV show was Antiques Roadshow. So maybe that was, I think, like my other 5th graders featured, it was like Rugrats and other cartoons. So that was maybe a premonition of what was to come. And developed a reputation just from a small blog that a person started that I began writing for about a year after college. It was really just meant to be a hobby, but it exploded because of the passionate group of people behind it and kind of meeting an unserved market. And that blog that started, literally with 2 or 3 readers went on to now be kind of the leading publication in the world of watches. It has a $100 million valuation, 60 employees, Tom Brady, John Mayer, others are investors in the company, and it's become quite a, it went from this little renegade thing to kind of being the establishment, which is interesting. But I got recruited by Christie's, and I had an opportunity to go to Hodinkee full-time or another auction house, and decided to go to Christie's and pivot away from biofuels about 6 years ago, and was vice president, senior specialist of watches there. It was an incredible experience. And then decided I had the opportunity and clients and ability to start my own business. So I did that almost 4 years ago. And I think the kind of dry, pessimistic tone of the last panel, hopefully we're turning the taste towards something a little bit more sweet after this. But I think one of those things that's missing for our nationalism as a country is just that we're a country united by hard work, whether you're starting something like the Heritage Foundation or Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation or other companies. Whether you're starting an institution or a nonprofit or a company, it takes work, and it takes, there's always challenges, and you need to work through those, and that's kind of what I think gives us that American perseverance and resolve. And part of what makes us a community. I always think of, there's a book by The Onion that was an atlas to the world. It came out about 15 years ago. And the introduction for the United States pages was, America is the place where everyone tries to climb the ladder of success, only to kick the ladder down once they get to the top. So I think about that, and that's not something we want to continue to pursue as a country. So it's just an honor to be here. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Will. It's so great to be with you all and see so many friendly faces. I get to be the least credentialed panelist today, unfortunately. But I'm hoping as a recent graduate, I just graduated 2 years ago from Harvard, as Claire said. Hopefully I can share some of my personal experience with ISI and also sort of at the university as it is today. When I got to Harvard in 2014, my freshman year, Johnny was talking last night about how universities, especially ones like Harvard, are often at the vanguard of the progressive movement, and I think that's certainly what I saw as a kid coming from Oklahoma, from public school. I didn't know what I had coming when I got to campus. I think day one orientation was led by the LGBT Center and the Women's Center, and I got to share my pronouns for the first time in my life. And so it was a very surreal experience. And I think over time, as I got to know my fellow peers, you understand that you get to know that like a lot of these people who you're eating lunch with, who you're going to class with, who you're going to parties with, these are the people who are the vanguard of the progressive movement. They're the ones coming up with the ideas, talking to each other, continually trying to push each other and sort of in more and more extreme directions. And so it was a very surreal experience getting to be friends with and classmates with these people and sort of see them organizing events and trying to develop their own sense of the world. And I would actually go to some of these. That's how I know about them. I distinctly remember there was one that a friend was putting on called Out of Silence, where the Women's Center got these undergrads to come together and essentially pantomime sort of stories of procuring abortions. And I would go to that and sort of just out of a sort of morbid intellectual curiosity. And there was another one where there was, at my house in Courier, they were doing these struggle sessions, these racial struggle sessions where they would get all these undergrads together, have a leader, and sort of just try to sort of air out racial grievances. And I couldn't make it through the whole session, unfortunately. I just walked out in the middle of it. But I enjoyed at least getting to understand what people, I guess, why they thought these things and how they came to these conclusions. The struggle sessions, as an aside, as someone, my grandfather in China was actually, subject to one of these actual struggle sessions in China. He was, they would put a board in front of you with the list of all the things you did wrong, and they would sort of parade you around in public and tell you about all the things you did incorrectly. And so it was just so interesting to see how, at least the same principles, if not the exact same ritual, are sort of kind of making a comeback. And so I think that was all, very, very unfortunate to see. But I think the most interesting thing, we talk a lot about like the progressive activists on campus, but in my experience, actually, they were relatively few and far between. There were, maybe for every one activist, there were 50 what I would call careerists, which I think is the real, a significant challenge when we talk about universities is the vast majority of people, myself included when I got to Harvard, are not people who are extremely passionate about progressivism and these ideologies. They're people who want to sort of put their head down, study really hard, get the right internships, do the right clubs, to get the right job, to eventually go on to be very successful and make a lot of money. And if you think about the way the Harvard admissions system works, is it's biased towards people who can get the right test scores and can do the right things and say the right things to get there. And so that's unfortunately what I found was that a lot of people are essentially there to just kind of keep their head down, not offend too many people. And so there's a lot of this sort of live and let live, sort of laissez-faire approach to politics, to these ideas. And so, I was very fortunately, I knew that I was pro-life going to college. And that was the sort of door to meeting some of the good people on campus. Tyler Dobbs is here today. He was actually someone I met through Harvard Right to Life who introduced me to ISI. I had no idea what it was. I came in as a computer scientist, so I was busy, studying for Silicon Valley and doing all that. And he was like, "No, you have to go to ISI." And so he just kind of like cajoled me into going to honors, which I did in 2016. It was in Skamania, Washington, and it was incredible. It was there were incredible professors like Dr. Corey and who were there, sort of giving us these ideas in a seminar style. They would get us together and we just sort of talk about a reading, and she wouldn't lecture at us, but she would sort of facilitate and sort of draw ideas out of the text and ideas that I'd never engaged with before in college. And so those ideas, I would come out of every seminar with so many sort of just conflicting ideas, always having learned something, but always having more questions than answers. And then the other thing that really struck me about ISI was the people. The community, the people who were at honors were just some of the best that I've ever met. They continue to be my best friends. One of them was my confirmation sponsor. Just lifelong friends, many of them who are here today. And so I got addicted essentially. And so over the next 2 years, I probably went to at least 20 conferences and seminars and Liberty Fund.
Jeez.
I've probably set a record for sure. Right? That's got to be a record. No, I would take any excuse to go. I would just ask them for invitations to just keep coming back because I would learn so much. And I remember being every time just feeling so guilty being a computer science major at an ISI conference because people would talk about these ideas and the meaning of life and philosophy, and I'd have no idea what they were talking about. And so I remember coming back for winter break, I think my junior year, and just sitting my dad down at the dining table, and I told him, "Dad, I'm not going to be a computer science major anymore. I'm going to study English." and that was the fastest veto I ever got. So that, suffice to say, that did not happen. What he let me do was he let me do a joint degree. So I would study computer science. I was 3 out of 4 years done with that. But he let me do a joint degree with government. So that's what I ended up doing is, as a result of ISI, I ended up deciding to switch my major. I didn't take any computer science my last year. I just took government. I took Harvey Mansfield's courses. I took modern political philosophy, and I was just I was so enamored with this sort of lifelong pursuit of knowledge that I got out of ISI. And the other thing too is just sort of the conviction that these ideas are important. That it's not okay to just it's hard. You can't come out of an ISI conference, go back to school, and then just keep your head low when someone says something that is wrong. And so I think there was this renewed commitment to, hosting a campus-wide debate on the Hyde Amendment, organizing trips to the March for Life, organizing an Anscombe conference. We started doing all these things on campus, and the ISI community the ISI Society at Harvard had just started up. And so we had this strong community of people who were going to ISI, we were meeting together, we were organizing things, and that just, that's sort of been, I think, the theme of the last couple of years for me has been getting to be part of that community of people, pursuing and doing things, sort of using my life to sort of promote these ideas that we know are important. After graduation in 2019, I moved to DC. I had this computer science degree, but I wanted to work in politics and ideas, and so I kind of was able to combine those things in Numenar, which is a political campaign technology startup that I started with a couple of friends out of Harvard, and that's been a wonderful journey. We built a software system that uses machine learning to try to identify for public voter data how voters are going to behave in elections, and we help campaigns target voters as a result. We did 10 campaigns in 2019 out of school, and then we grew that up to 70 this last year, and the idea is to just continue to grow it and hopefully provide what often is a missing skill set in the conservative movement to help sort of promote candidates and ideas that we care about. And then the other thing that I was able to do in DC is sort of continue that community, the ISI community in DC, where we started an alumni chat. Really what it was is John Adams Society had an alumni debate in DC, and we would invite folks from all over the sort of DC young professional scene, and it went so well, and people really enjoyed it, and they kept asking, like, when's the next debate? And there was no plan for a next debate. So long story short, we decided to form the Cicero Society. We started doing monthly debates hosted in our house, and it's grown to be maybe 40, 50 folks or so now, and it's a really incredible community where we get to continue talking about the ideas that we get to talk about at ISI. And I think a good contingent of Cicero folks are here today. So, I think it's exciting to see where that'll continue to go over time. But certainly the ideas, the convictions, the community are all things that I'm sort of, eternally grateful to ISI for getting.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists for sharing. I will take moderator's privilege and ask a question, if you don't mind. If you could briefly answer, if you were a high school junior or senior today, what college would you choose?
Well, my son-in-law runs the Kirby Center in Washington, D.C., and our daughter, Elizabeth, went to Hillsdale, and I really haven't got much choice, do I? I think we'd look seriously at Hillsdale, and I was talking with somebody the other day, and this imprimis now has a circulation of 8 million.
Oh, come on.
8
I
million.
thought it was 3.
8 million.
Jeepers.
That's what one college is doing and impacting upon people. So Ed and I are both incurable optimists. You're going to get lots of optimism from us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I teach for his son-in-law at the Kirby Center at Hillsdale. So. But there are great conservative institutions out there, whether it's Belmont Abbey, Grove City, Hillsdale, Thomas Aquinas, Thomas More. There are also others where there are still contingents of good, sensible faculty where young people can go, and just urge you, if you are in a position to help somebody make that decision, get to know who's on that faculty. Look at the rankings. ISI hadn't done it lately, have you?
Not lately, but
Not lately, but there was a ranking 6-7 years ago of, who's up, down, sideways. And when you think about where you have college, where you have clubs on college or university campuses, at least you know that your child will not be or your grandchild will not be the only one there thinking these heretical thoughts, if you will, in the woke era.
I have a 7-year-old son, so I was thinking about this actually last night. Even though thinking about his college dreams, planning ahead. But if Hillsdale can produce someone like Johnny Burtka, that has a bright future, obviously. There's also obviously something to be said to go into the elite institutions and engage with the ideas there. So really will depend on what he wants to do. But, Robbie George at Princeton is a hero of mine as well.
And I'm looking right here. I mean, Baylor is, but Baylor Honors is fantastic.
Yeah.
And, there are centers like that at different universities that if you can pick one out, man, that's where to go.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think, the sharpest people at all of the ISI seminars were always the Hillsdale, the Thomas Aquinas, the Christendom students. And so, those definitely are up there. My girlfriend's been whispering Princeton to me this whole time. So I think I would actually say Princeton. Robbie George does have an incredible institute there, and there's a very strong community of conservatives there. So it feels so wrong saying, but I would probably say Princeton.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you all. Our first question is from Elise, an ISI alumna. Thank you for recounting the history of ISI. God willing, ISI will turn 100 years old in 2053. What fruits do you hope ISI will have borne by then?
Well, there's no doubt about that the liberals and the progressives have managed to capture most, if not all, of the academy. They're firmly ensconced there. But there's one thing going for us, and that is they're getting old, and they're dying, which is good. It's good. It's good they're dying. And they won't be able to appoint their friends as professors and as deans and as presidents. So, but I do think that ISI is unique in that it does a deep dive into ideas. And that is what it must continue to do. Johnny, this is what it must continue to do. There are a lot of great youth groups out there. I helped to found one of them, Young Americans for Freedom, Leadership Institute, and Turning Point, et cetera, and they can turn out wonderful crowds for speakers like Ben Shapiro, who is terrific, doing good work. But we need that organization like ISI, which is diving deep into it and coming up with an understanding of what is important about why do we not worship, but why do we honor the first principles of our founding? What is Western civilization really based upon? Those are the questions which ISA must continue to examine, to explore, and to promote.
All I'd add to that is that even as the liberals die early, that in 2053, Lee Edwards will be 132 years old, writing the 100th anniversary book about ISI, and we look forward to that.
I have nothing to add. I think that's perfect.
All right, we have time for one brief question. I have it in the back end. Mrs. Kirk.
Appropriate.
Since we were talking about how wonderful the benefits of ISI are, I thought it might interest this particular group to know that in February of 1960, I attended a conference in New York at the Hotel Wellington, and that ISI was one of the sponsors. And I was a spokesman. I was just a junior in college. And in that audience at that time was Russell Kirk. And then that following summer, I attended the first ISI summer school at Grove City, and Russell was there again for a whole week. And then in the fall, I was student council president at my small girls' college, and was able to then, because Lee and I had gone to, and I think Ed was there too, to the Sharon Conference at Buckley's estate. And so we founded the Sharon Conference Statement. And so as a result of all of that, 4 years later, I married Russell Kirk, and now I'm president of the Russell Kirk Center, and we are coordinating with lots with ISI because we have had their seminars in McCosta Little Village since 1973. And so there's lots of benefits, young women out there.
What Annette is leaving out is that Russell Kirk, who was speaking, and there in the front row was Annette, and whom we refer to always as the beauteous Annette. And he could not take his eyes off of her. He couldn't get through his lecture because of this beautiful girl in the first row. And they had lunch together, and things developed very nicely from then on. So these are the benefits of going to an ISI.
Actually, on that note, if we could have a show of hands if you have met your spouse or roommate or closest friends from ISI. Show of hands.
Closest friends, yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. So on that, we have a brief video to share featuring Eric. If you go pay attention to the screen.
ISI really meant a huge amount to me in terms of my time at Georgetown, the wide array of things that I was involved with ISI, including the honors program, the collegiate network, and the colloquia. I knew even when I was graduating that the experiences I had were reasons I wanted to support ISI any way that I can. My name's Eric Wind. I'm based in Palm Beach, Florida, originally from Manitowoc, Wisconsin. I am a vintage watch dealer focused on selling exceptional watches. I was working at Christie's as vice president, senior specialist of watches, and it was a really wonderful time and a whirlwind experience, but it was so busy. The core clients that I had developed and was working with did want more of my time or assistance developing their collection or evaluating watches coming up for auction or for sale, that it seemed like a good time to start my own business. It was a blessing starting Wind Vintage with my wife, Christine. Really something we both work on daily. Among my clients are titans of industry, celebrities, actors, actresses. So it's been a very exciting time. I'm very excited to donate this Rolex Day-Date from circa 1986. It is in 18-karat yellow gold. It's also nicknamed the President. Many presidents have worn this watch and owned this watch over the years. I thought it was an appropriate gift. It's kind of the sign of success. It looks great on a man or a woman. The strap that I've selected for the watch comes from a good friend of mine who's a strap maker in Minnesota, and I think it looks a little bit less formal on a strap than on a gold bracelet. And it is kind of a classic watch. It's automatic. It gives you the day of the week as well as the date. So this watch goes back to the 1950s. This particular example is in extremely nice original condition with what I would call an unpolished case, which is very important for collectors. So it's got a very crisp fluted bezel. This particular watch has Roman numerals around the edge of the dial, which I thought was a slight nod to the great works of the past. An example like this out in the open market is not easy at all, which is why I was excited to find it and donate it for this auction.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much to Eric for donating this watch to auction. And now we'd like to invite the auction winner, board member John Slavic, up to do the official transfer of the watch. Official.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Thank you.